I looked down at the creaky basement stairs trailing off into a void of darkness. I tried to swallow, but my throat wouldn't let me. I was too afraid. My grandma's house was a mostly pleasant place to me, all except the basement, that is. The basement was old and smelled of mildew and dust. The stairs leading down were the wooden ones that have gaps behind each stair, which only amplified the feeling that when you walked down them, something would grab you from underneath. There were 3 singular lights down there that had to be turned on with pull cords, so you had to go down to near complete darkness to turn them on. I stood at the top of the stairs, my childhood imagination running wild with thoughts of monsters in the darkness. But I knew I had to go down. Both my grandparents were disabled, so it had to be me to go bring up the things from the freezer my grandmom needed. I knew the very real risk of one of them injuring themselves down there, so that greatly outweighed my fear of things that could lurk down there in the dark. I took a deep, shaky breath and ran down the stairs as fast as I could and sprinted towards the first light. The dim light buzzed softly with electricity as it came to life. It only illuminated about a 4-foot circle around me. I looked around at the old workbench and all the random stuff that was down there, which did nothing but creep me out even more. There were so many dark corners for things to lurk, and the dim ring of light around me only made the rest of the darkness seem even more oppressive. As I was preparing myself to run to the next light near the old fridge, suddenly I was plunged into darkness. I didn't hear a click or the distinct popping noise of a bulb dying. It was just silent. Waves of fear washed over me as my mind raced. I had to do something. I ran towards the next light, feeling invisible hands reaching for me as I moved. Nothing. The lights weren't working. I pulled the chain again, keeping my eyes shut tight, just praying that when I pulled again, I'd see a flash of light through my eyelids. But I didn't. It was dark. The only light in the basement was the subtle glow of the street lights coming through the tiny basement windows. I told myself on repeat that there was nothing there and monsters weren't real. I took a deep breath as I flung the door of the freezer open and grabbed the things my grandma had asked me to bring up. I started turning to run back to the stairs when I heard the worst noise I could have imagined in that moment. The basement door slammed shut loudly and forcefully. No, 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 please no. I scrambled up the stairs as fast as my body would carry me and tried desperately to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The door didn't have a lock on it, but it did stick in the frame sometimes and was hard for even a grown adult to open, let alone a young girl. My grandparents never closed it for exactly that reason. Grandma, Grandpa, someone, please, please open the door. I dropped everything I was holding and violently shook the door handle as hard as I could. I yanked and pulled on it desperately, but it didn't move. The door opened in towards the basement, so ramming myself into it wasn't an option. But truthfully, I wasn't strong enough to unstick the door, let alone bash my way through it. Then a horrible thought crept into my mind. The door faced inward. There was no draft at all, let alone one strong enough to have done that. Someone had to have slammed it like that from inside the basement. Then I remembered just to the left of the fridge was the cellar door that led to the outside. But I'd have to go all the way across the basement to get there. I sat for a moment with my head against the door and my back scrunched tightly against the wall, trying to figure out what to do when I heard a noise from below. It was just a quiet scuffle, like someone dragging something across the concrete floor, but it sounded like it was directly below me. I froze as I listened. There it was again. It sounded like it was moving from under the stairs toward the bottom step. I was shaking so violently, if someone had seen me, they probably would have thought I was having a seizure. Maybe I was, I don't really know. Grandma, Grandpa, please open the door, please, please, please. I slammed my fist as hard as I could against the door. From below me, I heard the same sound, growing closer. I slammed my fist so hard I had long, colorful bruises on them for a week after. I'm truthfully amazed I didn't break any bones in my hands. As I heard the noise again, I turned my head towards the bottom of the stairs. I thought for a second I could make the outline of some tall, lanky dark figure hunched over just past the stairs, just beginning to stand up below in the darkness. In that moment, the purest form of fight or flight took over my body. It was almost like being possessed by someone else, someone far braver and smarter than me. Before I could have any more thoughts, I launched myself through the gap in the railing onto the concrete floor. I hit the ground hard, but I had too much adrenaline to care. I heard some kind of deep, raspy, inhuman groan coming from behind me as I got back onto my feet and started running toward the cellar doors. I could hear whatever it was, joints crackling and popping as it shuffled towards me, making that awful dragging noise. I didn't dare turn around to see it. As I finally reached the little stairs leading to freedom, I rammed my shoulder as hard as I could against the cellar doors. They were heavy and barely moved at all when I slammed into them, but I knew this was life or death. I wedged myself between the top step and one side of the doors and pushed myself and the door up with all my strength. I heard the raspy groan growing closer and louder. I pushed the door as hard as I could until finally I could see the backyard. I felt something unnaturally cold and bony swipe against my leg as I fell out onto the ground. "Chloe?" I heard my grandmom say in a completely confused voice from over by the pond. "Honey, what are you doing?" The basement door, it slammed shut. I panted, my mind still racing. The comfort of adults being with me again started to melt the fear off of me. I gained enough courage to look down the cellar steps. For just a moment, I saw something slink back away into the darkness. It looked pale and bony and just wrong. I saw a singular bloodshot eye that was far too big and wide with no iris as it vanished into the darkness. As soon as that eye connected sight with mine, the fear returned and I slammed the door shut aggressively. "Baby, what are you doing? Are you okay?" My grandmom started to make her way over to me with a look of grave concern on her face. "What happened to you?" I looked down at myself. I was covered in dust and dirt, bleeding in a few places. The side of my body that hit the basement floor when I jumped off the stairs was covered in scabs with purple bruises beginning to form underneath. The sides of my fists were swollen and already beginning to change colors from banging so hard against the door. After I gained my composure for a moment, I looked at my grandmom's sweet, concerned face. "The basement door slammed shut on me and I thought I thought something else was down there. I was yelling for you guys, but no one answered me." I knew as I was saying it, she wasn't going to believe me that something was down there. I shook my head and covered my face in my hands. "I'm so sorry, honey. We came outside to feed the fish when you went down. Can't hear anything from out here. Not at our age anyway." She smiled playfully but dropped her smile once she realized how shaken up I really was. "The dark can play tricks on our minds sometimes. That's probably all it was." She smiled and rubbed her hand against my back gently. "Why don't you go inside and get yourself washed up and we'll watch a movie, and when you're done here, maybe some ice cream?" I walked inside from the back of the house so I wouldn't have to go past the basement. As I was washing off all the dirt off myself and cleaning up my scrapes, I heard this distinct pop of the basement door unsticking, followed by the slow creaks of the hinges. I froze in place, listening for every possible sound. It was quiet. I peeked my head out the little window to see both of my grandparents were still outside by the pond. The bathroom was in the same hallway as the basement door, so I got onto the ground and looked under the crack of the door. I couldn't see much, but I could see that the basement door was wide open now and a few of the things I had dropped sitting on the steps. I didn't see movement and I couldn't hear the grotesque raspy groans or crackling of that thing. I opened the door slowly, trying not to make a sound, and stepped into the hallway. I inched closer towards the steps, keeping my eyes fixed on the black void of the basement. Nothing was there. I slid my way past the open basement door into the kitchen to grab a flashlight. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it all around into the dark basement. Still nothing. By some miracle, none of the things I dropped fell off the stairs and were all still between the first and third steps. It's all in your head. Grandma is right. Nothing was there. You're okay, I told myself, keeping the flashlight fixed towards the steps. I knelt down as far back from the actual basement as I could to grab the things I dropped. Just as I was to grab the last item, I heard a dishearteningly familiar sound. A slow, dragging shuffle combined with a popping and crackling. Not from the basement, but from behind me. I turned my head towards the hallway and then felt the life force drain out of me as my eyes once again met those horrible, iris-less bloodshot eyes. Whatever it was tall and thin, covered in semi-translucent pale flesh that seemed like it was draped over the thing's skeleton. It didn't seem like it was attached in any meaningful way. Its arms and torso were both too long and skinny, so were its horrible bony fingers with black, rotten nails. And its face, its damn face. Two bulging, bloodshot eyes that were too close together with tiny black dots in the middle. A long, thin mouth with no lips that were just parted enough to reveal what seemed to be rows of thin, yellow, orange needle-like teeth. It seemed to have no expression on its face, but looking at it pierced through my soul with hopelessness. It looked like the result of a mad scientist trying to combine an emaciated human-alien hybrid with an anglerfish or something horrible like that. Fear once again took over. I tried to scream, but instead my mouth just hung open silently. I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed, kneeling on the floor, just staring at this thing. It slowly began to move towards me, making those horrible fucking noises. The way it moved was unnatural. It was almost like when you're watching someone move in a strobe light. Disjointed, like it was teleporting a few inches at a time more than walking with its legs, despite the noises it made as it moved. It was within a few feet of me as it began reaching out towards me with its horrible, twisted fingers. As it reached out to touch me, my body abruptly released me from my paralysis and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't know I was capable of making a noise that loud. I screamed so loud I seemed to startle the thing for a second. It paused before turning its head 180 degrees with a sickening crunch to face the back door. I heard the door fly open and my grandparents both calling my name with almost as much fear as I had. The thing let out a wailing, groaning scream for a lack of a better word and fled back into the basement. As I sat there shaking like a leaf, I saw my grandparents standing at the end of the hallway. What? I'd never seen my grandparents look so scared before. My grandmom rushed towards me with a quickness I didn't know she was capable of. She quickly ushered me out of the house as she yelled to my grandfather, directing him to go back out the door. Call the police, now! I don't remember most of the rest of the night. My grandparents rushed me outside and we all stood in their driveway and waited for them to arrive. It felt like hours to me, but it was probably less than 10 to 20 minutes before they arrived. They searched the whole house and yard, but they found nothing. When they asked us all for details about what we saw, my grandparents said it was a tall, skinny, naked, hairless man they'd seen running down into the basement. But I knew it wasn't a man. It wasn't human. I didn't tell the police that though. I knew no adult would really take me seriously if I'd explained the full extent of everything. I didn't want this to be just dismissed as a child's overactive imagination, even if my grandparents had seen it too. I just told the police the basement door slammed shut. I thought I heard someone down there and then saw someone in the hallway when I went to pick the things back up. I think some part of me just didn't really want to relive the whole thing again either. They did a full investigation of the basement, the house, searched the surrounding neighborhood and woods, but nothing ever came out of it as far as anyone told me. Thankfully, less than 6 months later, my grandparents ended up moving to a retirement home that was closer to our house, and I never had to go down in that basement again. But I will never forget what happened that night. I still sleep with the lights on a lot of the time, and I do everything in my power to avoid having any dark or open spaces behind me. I hate to admit that, but I'd rather have people think that I'm a pussy than ever have to see that thing again. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe again for the rest of my life. It's been more than 15 years since it happened, but some part of me will always be on edge, waiting for my gaze to meet those horrible eyes again. I had no intention of making a part 2. There shouldn't be one. This story should be said and done. Oh, maybe if I write about what happened, it will bring some kind of healing and I can finally move on from being a 30-year-old who sleeps with the lights on. I'm a damn idiot. My apologies in advance that this story will likely be less theatrical and well written than my first. My brain is trapped in a fresh trauma haze, or maybe it's just because I haven't slept in what feels like a lifetime now. I'm not sure how to process what happened. I feel lost. I don't know what else to do besides just get it out of my head and onto paper so I can make sense of all of this. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's just get into what happened. Not long after I posted my first story, I got a call from my mom. She told me that my grandparents' old house was back on the market, and since my grandparents have both passed, she really wanted to go and take a stroll down memory lane with me. The house had been part of her life since she was born until they moved, so I could sympathize with her wanting to go back. I could tell by the emotional tone in her voice when she asked me to come with her. This was really important to her. I thought to myself that maybe this is a sign from the universe that it's time to go back and confront my fears. I'd just written a story about it, so maybe this was the last piece of the puzzle I needed to fully heal. I had this grand plan of how I'd stroll down to the basement with all the confidence in the world, see nothing down there, conquer my fears, and finally move on with my life. It felt like the stars were aligning for me at that time. But right now, I really wish I'd chosen to interpret this differently. My mom set up a plan with the realtor to let us take about an hour to explore the house again, just the two of us at 2 PM the next day. We decided to make a lovely little day out of it. We went out to lunch together and were having an amazing time checking out my mom's old neighborhood before the appointment. She told me all kind of great stories about the kind of crazy things she used to do as a funny little hippie chick growing up in the 70s, and things about my grandparents I'd never known. But that's not what you're here for, are you? When we stepped into the house, it was amazing how similar it still looked. A few of the rooms had been painted and had a new carpeting, but no structural changes had been made, so it still felt like my grandparents' old house. My mom and I spent a good while just walking around and reliving various memories of how the house used to look different at points, fond memories we had with my grandparents, my mom's stories of her and her brother's childhood shenanigans. We were having such a great time, I didn't even feel a tinge of fear about the basement below us. Finally, as it was getting closer to the end of our allotted time, I worked up some courage and asked my mom if she would come down to the basement with me to face my fears head on. She looked nervous. "You're not worried about reliving what happened to you? You were shaken up for months, years after that happened. I didn't think you'd ever want to set foot down there again after that." "I don't really want to." I sighed heavily, looking towards the entrance of the basement. "But I think maybe it would be a healing experience to go down there and just see it as a plain, old, empty basement." My mom looked a little uneasy, but she agreed. I took the flashlight out of my bag and headed down the stairs with my mom following close behind me. The basement seemed most different out of anywhere else in the house. It still smelled like dust and mildew, but new shelves had been set up. The old workbench and fridge were both gone, and mostly everything had been cleared out except for a few random items here and there. I'd never seen it so empty. One thing that was still the same was the pull cord lights. Looking at them made me deeply uncomfortable. The memories were slowly creeping into the forefront of my mind, but I shook it off as best as I could. "It's in your head, you have to stop being like this." The basement was well enough lit since it was midday, and the sun was shining in through the windows, but I decided to click on the light anyway. It felt like it needed to be part of the process of freeing myself from all of this. The sickeningly familiar hum of the light instantly brought back flashes of the last time I was down here, so I quickly turned it back off. Just then, I heard a loud thump from behind me. My mom and I both jumped. I could hear my heartbeat pounding out of my chest, but it wasn't the thump of some creature lurking in the darkness. It was the thump of a book falling off the shelf on the other side of the basement. We exchanged weirded out glances at each other before cautiously walking over to look at it. The book was simple looking. It was an old, dark brown leather journal with a matching string to tie it shut. There were random corners of pages sticking out all over the place, like it wasn't completely bound together. It didn't look to have any dust on it, which was unusual since all the other books on the shelf it had fallen from were covered in a thick layer with a few spider webs hanging off of them. I could see the spot from where it fell. There was a gap dead in the middle of the other books. The other surrounding books were just regular books you'd see at the library. A few romance novels, a couple of books about old cars, maintenance and repair manuals for old appliances. There was nothing particularly special about them, which made this one seem even weirder. My mom and I again exchanged concerned glances at each other. There was no reason for this book that was in the middle of a shelf that backed up to a wall to have fallen off. It wasn't like it fell off the end, it came out of the middle of the other books. There weren't any places for things to be hiding in the darkness right now, but that did little to ease the tension in the air. As I looked at the book, I started to feel a powerful urge to pick it up come over me. Did this book have answers? Did someone want me to read something in this? What if it was a sign from my grandmom or something? I think maybe we should go back upstairs, my mom said as I started leaning down to pick up the book. That snapped me out of my momentary trance I was in. After all I'd been through, was I really stupid enough to pick up mysterious, creepy books that just fall by themselves? What the hell was wrong with me? Was I really about to engage with whatever fuckery was going on in the most dramatic place in my life? I was becoming the person in a horror movie everyone always calls an idiot. The kind of person I would call an idiot. Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. We left the book on the ground where it fell and quickly headed out of the house and got back into the car. Our allotted hour was almost up anyway by that point. On the car ride back to my mom's house, I felt horrible that my plans to conquer my fears had completely ruined the mood of the trip. We drove in silence for a while before I finally spoke up. So, what do you think that was about? My mom didn't turn to look at me. I don't know, babe. That was weird. She seemed off, but I couldn't place my finger on what was going on with her. I could tell she was deep in thought the rest of the car ride. I made a couple attempts to bring up happy memories again, but my mom wasn't getting back into the way she was before. She'd smile and nod and add a few short sentences here and there, but I could tell it wasn't the same. I'm sorry, Mom, I sighed heavily. I didn't think anything weird like that would go on in the basement. I thought I'd just look at it, realize it's just a basement, and then I'd be good. It's not your fault. She finally looked at me again sympathetically. You didn't make that weird book fall off the shelf or anything. How would you have known? Known what? There was something weird about the way she said it. She paused for a long minute. Just that a random book would fall off the shelf and scare us. I mean, you know, I'm not a fan of being scared. Yeah, I know, but that was so fucking weird, right? I really wanted my mom to give some explanation of why that happened, but she didn't. There was no draft, there was no one else in the basement. It was in the middle of a shelf, like, what the hell? It really was. I have no genuine rational explanation for what happened. I did feel like my mom was telling the truth when she said that. Mom, you remember what happened to me there? Did anything like that ever happen to you when you lived there? She paused before sighing. I guess I can tell you now that you're an adult. I never wanted to bring it up when you were younger because of what you went through. My mom went on to explain that when she was a teenager hanging out with her friends, her door flung open so hard it ricocheted off the wall and no one was there. Her brother swears up and down to this day that it wasn't him. Then she told me that one night she had awoken in the middle of the night to a tall, dark, lanky figure standing just past the end of her bed, just staring at her. She said she felt completely paralyzed with fear. She gathered the courage to raise up her hand and make a sign of the cross, and that it just vanished. She moved out not long after that, but she said she never saw it again. I wasn't sure if there was any connection to what happened to me in the basement, but it was definitely really strange and disturbing. I could hear that familiar lump of fear stuck in her throat while she recounted the story I had written the first one I posted. I wanted to press her for more information, but I felt like I'd done enough damage for the day. I really didn't want this to ruin an overall pleasant day with my mom. Eventually, we shook off the weird vibes and enjoyed the rest of our day hanging out together, but it stayed in the back of my mind. That night, I had a nightmare. I was down in the dark basement and it looked like it had when I was a child. There was only one light on and it was the one closest to where the shelves had been when we just were there. The noise of the light instantly made me painfully uncomfortable. The noise made my head feel like it was being swarmed by wasps. I hate that sound. I walked over and saw the only thing on that shelf was that leather-bound book. When I got close to it, the book flung itself open, revealing pages of scribbled writing in a language I didn't know, and drawings of what I saw all those years ago. A horrible, tall, pale, bloodshot-eyed monstrosity. I wanted to get away, but I didn't feel like I had any control over my body. The drawings seemed to vary in level of skill. Some were rough drawings like you'd expect from a really small child. Others were drawn in great detail, clearly by an at least somewhat professional artist. I reached a hand out to touch the book and it slammed shut. Just then, I felt an icy, cold, bony hand death grip onto my shoulder. I didn't want to turn around, but I did. And there it was. In all of its horrifying glory, just as it had been when I was a child. It spoke in a distorted, two-toned voice. It sounded as if someone was talking in a rough but high whispery voice overlaid by someone saying the exact same words at the same time in a much deeper, almost staticky voice. It sounded like someone's voice being played over a radio instead of just someone talking to you directly. That might not make sense, but I've never heard anything like it to compare it with.
I knew you'd come back for me.
Its mouth never moved, but it felt like it was screaming those words directly into my brain.
I've waited so long for you, Chloe. I knew you'd never forget about me. You are special, aren't you? Lots of people are full of fear, but there's something about you.
The way it paused when it said fear was similar to the way you might pause for thinking of a cherished memory. Or maybe your favorite food. Its mouth stretched farther open, showing its horrible needle-like sharp teeth.
Even as an adult, there's something about how deep your fear runs. Your fear of me. That is just so... satisfying.
It turned its head a little bit too far to the side, seeming to eye me up and down. Then it showed the first expression of genuine emotion I'd ever seen on it. Pure, furious rage.
You didn't take my book. I gave it to you. You wanted answers. I have given them to you. You don't dare disrespect me that way. You have no idea what I can do.
Suddenly, I returned to consciousness. I was standing in my bedroom facing the dark, empty hallway of my own home. My breathing was shallow and shaky as I looked around widely, expecting to see that thing standing behind me somewhere. And then my eyes met it. There was the book, sitting in the middle of my hallway, being illuminated by the small nightlight I had there. It looked like someone had placed it in there intentionally, open. I wanted to slam my door shut and scream, but I felt a powerful compulsion to go towards it. I felt like I had no choice anymore. It was never going to leave me alone, no matter what. Why not just look? What more did I have to lose? I stood over the book and looked at the open page. There was a drawing of the creature. My drawing. I drew it shortly after the incident as a child and threw it in the trash immediately after. But there it was, all wrinkled up and attached to the page. On the other side of the page was a bunch of script I wasn't familiar with. There were strange symbols and crude sort of drawings around the writing. I I unintentionally gasped as the page began flipping wildly as I had in my nightmare. It abruptly stopped on a page that read, "Once it has you, it will never let you go." Just below that was written in almost illegible handwriting stained with what looked like tears. "If you are reading this, may God have mercy on your soul. He has abandoned me. Maybe he has abandoned all of us." I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I slowly backed up into my room, not wanting to take my eyes off the book and turn around. I knew nothing good was going to happen next. I tried everything in my power not to feed into this, not to be afraid, but that's really easier said than done, isn't it? Then I heard it. The deep, raspy groan followed by the sounds of its horrible body popping and crackling as it moved behind me. I felt all the color drain out of my face. But then that same powerful form of self-preservation took a hold of me as it had when I was a child. I turned around to face it and began to yell, "Fuck you, you're not..." I was yelling at nothing, except my very confused partner, who was now awake and looking at me with justifiable concern and confusion. "What the hell?" "The book." I whipped around to show him, but there was nothing there. I was fucking losing it. Had I still been dreaming until just now? Whether I was being stalked or just losing my fucking mind, I knew I was in trouble. I sat down on the bed next to my partner and buried my face in my hand. I think I'm losing my grip on reality. He sat up and talked to me for a bit. I explained the dream, the book, what happened at my grandparents' house. I wanted so badly for him to give me some rational explanation for this. I wanted someone to give me answers and comfort me that all of this made sense somehow. My partner leaned over and hugged me tight before putting his hands against my shoulder. "I'll never let you go." "What did you just say?" I felt the pit in my stomach come back to full force as he started holding me more forcefully. I tried to push back to look at him, but he tightened his grip harder. Much, much harder.
"I said I'll never let you go."
The voice wasn't my partner's anymore. I felt the warmth of his embrace go cold. I was down at the shoulder I was being pressed against, and it was my partner's. It was an all too familiar, pale, bony, deathly cold shoulder of that fucking thing. I tried to struggle and get away, but the harder I struggled, the tighter its grip became. It was holding me so tight, I thought that maybe it was trying to absorb me into it.
"You should have listened to your instincts about monsters in the dark, Chloe. And now, no one will believe you. No one is coming to help you. Everyone will think you're going insane and lock you away, just like all the others. And even then, I will have you. I will always have you. Nothing can keep you from me."
"What the fuck do you want from me?" I tried again to escape its embrace, but I felt so much weaker than I felt before. I felt that life was draining out of my body as the grip holding me continued to become stronger. I tried to move my hands to make the sign of the cross like my mom did, but I couldn't move. I felt like I was being pressed against dry ice. It was becoming hard to breathe. I was starting to feel like I might lose consciousness at any moment.
"I want you, Chloe."
It hissed. It felt like its words were inside my brain, clawing and tearing it apart from the inside out. I continued to try with all that I had left to struggle, but I felt my body go limp. This is it, I thought to myself. This is how I die. I was prepared to accept my fate and let go of hope when I heard glass shattering and a bright light suddenly filled my room. What the fuck? It was my partner. I heard a loud, furious hiss of a groan and then suddenly felt my body released from the grip of death itself. The thing just vanished into thin air before either of us could process what just happened. I turned to look at my partner, who was standing next to a light switch with his jaw on the floor. I'd never seen him look like that. He's an almost annoyingly irrational person, and he certainly didn't get scared easily. He was the kind of guy who loves during horror movies because how ridiculous he thinks they are. All around the floor in front of him were shards of glass from the water he just dropped when he saw it. He quickly jumped over the glass and ran to me, holding me tight. I almost wanted to push him away after what just happened, but I knew this was him for real this time. Do I call the police? What the fuck? Are you okay? You're so pale and cold. Do I need to get an ambulance? He pushed back to get a good look at me. I didn't know what I looked like, but I could tell by the look on his face I was in a bad shape. He was clearly terrified for me. After some discussion, he did end up taking me to the ER to get me checked out. My body temperature, heart rate and blood pressure were all distressingly low, or so they told us. All the doctors and nurses were whispering around me and giving me looks of concern and shooting my partner weird, judgmental looks. I had deep purple and blue bruises where the creature had been holding me. The nurses informed me I also seemed to have fairly severe frostbite in some places over the bruises. My skin looked like it was becoming necrotic where it touched me. I imagine if my partner hadn't been as attentive and so distraught looking, they might have assumed he did that to me. They asked me a lot of questions, but I kept my answers as vague as possible. I said I woke up like this and that was all I knew. My partner followed suit when questioned. I wasn't about to get myself locked up in a mental hospital for telling the truth. I'm sure even if my partner attested to what we saw, they would have called it a shared delusion. I mean, what person in their right mind would believe any of this? I don't even know if I believe it, and I'm the one this happened to. My brain felt like it was full of static and far away. I couldn't form any real thoughts. I'm still struggling with that. My brain just keeps flashing between images of that thing and the feeling of it draining the life out of me. And its awful, fucking distorted voice. They made me stay overnight so they could work out the best treatment for my wounds. Thankfully, my partner stayed and they let me keep the lights in my room since it was just me. But it did very little to make me feel safe. Neither me nor my partner slept at all that night. Nothing felt safe. Nothing feels safe. As I'm writing this, I'm sitting with my back jammed up against the wall and every light on in the house. I've started hoarding flashlights and any other kind of portable lights. I'm putting them all over every inch of the house. I don't think I've ever really slept since this happened. I'm trying to figure out how to attach a super bright flashlight directly to my skin or something. I'm at the point where I'd cut off my hand to replace it with a flashlight if that was an option. Or pump myself full of radioactive material until I'm lit up like the 4th of July. Anything would be better than feeling like this. The parts of my skin where it touched me haven't healed at all as far as I can tell. They told me I might need a skin graft where it's the worst, but I doubt it will matter. Nothing matters anymore. The only thing I know for sure now are that whatever that thing is, it doesn't like the light, and I don't think it will ever leave me alone. It will be always waiting for me to slip up and step into the darkness again. I worry that even if I die without seeing it again, it will be waiting for me on whatever is on the other side of this life. If it does come from me again, I don't think I'd be lucky enough to be telling the story of what happens. I'm running out of time. I can feel it.